Iranians are casting their ballots today in an election that promises to have far-reaching consequences for the rest of the world. This morning, Iran's Ayatollah cast the first vote, as always. In this election, the two frontrunners have different visions about the path forward for the country and its relationship with the West. Journalist Tara Kangarloo covered the Iranian nuclear deal back in 2015 and joins me from New York to explain what's at stake. Tara, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
So Canadians don't know too much about this election. There are two frontrunners. Can you explain to me who they are and what their views are on the West?
Absolutely. Today, millions of Iranians are voting for two candidates, as you mentioned. It's a very polarized race between current President Hassan Rouhani, who really championed the nuclear deal with his cabinet, in particular, Foreign Minister Zarif leading the way. So we saw a lot of that in the past 2 years, especially as the negotiations were going on. And the second candidate, the contender, is a conservative cleric, Ebrahim Raisi, who's the custodian of one of the wealthiest shrines and conglomerates in the Shia world. And he's running hard, and he's been campaigning pretty aggressively against the incumbent President Hassan Rouhani.
Now, how much of an... go on, I'm sorry. Please.
No, and to your question about its relationship with the West, it's pretty simple. With President Rouhani's election, if President Rouhani is elected, you're going to see a continuation of the policy of moderation toward the West, pretty much what we saw in the past couple of years. But when you have somebody like Raisi, who comes from a conservative strand, you're going to see something like what we saw with the Ahmadinejad presidency and during his era, which is more of a policy of isolation.
Well, if I'm reading between the lines, it seems to me that whoever wins could alter the fate of the 2015 nuclear deal. Is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely. But we have to remember that the nuclear accord has been made, right? It's between Iran and 6 other world powers. So really, it's an international agreement. And that's something to remember. But what's important for millions of Iranians is what this nuclear deal can do for them. So if you have a president like Hassan Rouhani, he's going to continue that policy of engagement. So he's going to do all he can to avoid any rogue behavior from his end, and as much as he can, control the spoilers inside Iran to prevent any mishap in continuation of lifting of the sanctions or any matter that can lead to the breach of this deal, which would be very complicated. But on the other hand, if you have a president like Raisi, he comes from a strand of the government within the regime that is really not pro-engagement. They are interested in having Iran as a power in and itself in an isolated state. So he's not going to be as engaging as the previous administration was, which ultimately, like you said, is going to have a strong effect on the Accord's effect and impact and what the people wanted it to promise.
Tara, could the impact of President Donald Trump's trip to the Middle East, could that spur people away from moderation and vote for the extremist in the race, given the fact that he has been very vocal against the Iranian nuclear deal, given the fact that he is going to visit Israel, which is a longtime enemy of the state of Iran? Could any of those things impact the vote and sort of push the pendulum towards, away from moderation, rather?
That's an interesting question. And in my opinion, I think it's actually going to have people vote. Iran has over 80 million people, and 50% of them are under the age of 30. And what you see a lot are these young, educated, vibrant voters, especially in urban areas, who want a president that can help them engage with the world. Now, whether it's with Donald Trump or any other president in the United States or Western countries, Canada or European countries, Iranians want to belong to the world. And I think they take these opportunities as a moment where they can raise their voice, vote, and choose someone that can help them get out of isolation. But then again, in Iran, as you know, we don't have a monolithic society. So we have a strand that is very much in support of hardliners and conservatives who are absolutely against everything that Donald Trump says, and that aggression and hostility is something that would be visible and has been visible in the campaigns. But as far as the voters today, you're going to see a lot of Iranians that are going to take this opportunity, raise their voice, and hope that they can have a chance to enter the international stage.
Tara, lastly, before we go, how does the Supreme Leader, the Ayatollah, fit into the political system in Iran? Because the democracy there is not the democracy that we necessarily know in the West.
Sure. The Ayatollah, the Supreme Leader Khamenei, is the most powerful individual when it comes to policymaking in Iran, and everything that falls in the foreign policy space is in his helm. So he has the final say, but at the same time, the government has some sort of a control, at least when it comes to being the face of the nation. And I think we pretty much saw that when it came to the nuclear deal and the nuclear negotiations. Of course, he has to give his blessing to whatever policy that's being implemented, whatever plan that will take place, but at the same time, the government has a way of carrying that along. And I think if you look at President Ahmadinejad's presidency in the last 10 years and Rouhani's last 4 years, you can see that difference. But at the same time, the Supreme Leader is the ultimate voice. He's a strong supporter of the conservative candidate Raisi, and that's not being hidden. That's something that you can very clearly see.
Well, we'll be watching this with great intent. Tara Kangarloo, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
And